Hello and welcome to Cloud Speed by Deloitte. In this regular podcast series, we'll delve into the world of cloud, answering some of those tricky questions, getting to grips with all that cloud has to offer, and keeping you up to speed on recent developments. So let's begin, shall we? Here's your host, Adam Gorguri.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to Cloud Speed by Deloitte. I'm Adam Gogarty, Director in our Cloud and Engineering practice at Deloitte, and I'll be your host for this episode. It would be fair to say that many businesses in the consumer industry have faced unparalleled change in recent years, with a particular focus on digital and cloud transformations to address an ever-changing macro environment. So in today's episode, we'll be asking ourselves the question, what are the conditions for success in digital and cloud transformations in the consumer sector? To help us answer this tricky question, I'm delighted to be joined by my esteemed colleagues, Richard Forrest, Jeremy Russell, and Martin Willett. So hello team, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Hello, I'm Richard Forrest. I'm a partner in Deloitte's cloud transformation practice. I focus on delivery of cloud platforms for organisations who directly or indirectly can serve consumers.
Hi Adam, I'm Jeremy Russell. I'm a director leading our technology strategy and transformation practice for private sector clients, and I'm also the lead retail enterprise architect for Deloitte in the UK.
Hi Adam, I'm Martin Willett, partner in our digital practice focusing on digital transformation in consumer businesses from strategy through to run and optimization.
Fantastic. It sounds like we've assembled a fantastic panel of guests. So I guess, Jeremy, to just kick us off, what are the opportunities and challenges for consumer businesses and what are they facing at the moment?
It would probably be helpful to start with defining what we mean by consumer businesses, as that won't be an area that all of our audience work in, though it does include very many organisations that every one of us interacts with on a daily basis. So what do we mean by consumer? Well, essentially the businesses that sell stuff to consumers like you or me. So examples of industries we'd classify as consumer include the large consumer goods companies, the automotive industry, transportation, logistics, travel, hospitality, and the retailers who we actually buy the finished products from. So it's a broad group, Adam. In terms of the challenges and opportunities, well, if I look at the sector I spend most of my time with, retail, it's been a very wild ride now for the last few years in the UK. We've had Brexit, the pandemic, supply chain issues, now the cost of living crisis, all events that have massively impacted us as individuals and therefore our spending habits. And these are on top of the longer term shifts we see of changing consumer expectations and changes in our demographics. The culmination of all of these factors and forces have basically plunged retailers into an era of continual change, constant evolution as they try to maintain or grow their positions in the market. It can seem exhausting, but it does throw up opportunities if your business is nimble enough to exploit them. Martin, what's your view?
Yeah, so a lot of my work recently has been focused on marketplaces. And here we see a fascinating and complex combination where traditional pure play marketplaces extending increasingly into B2C offerings and existing retailers using customer relationships and presence to establish themselves as marketplaces, offering a channel for other retailers and consumer businesses. All of these organizations, of course, vying for the attention of the customer. And within that, pretty much any combination of services you can think of, from a lean marketplace offering the customer experience and payment through to full management of inventory and fulfillment services and customer services by some marketplaces. So consumer businesses themselves are having to work hard to work out the role of marketplaces for them. Is this an additional sales channel? Is it something they should be offering themselves because they've got existing relationships with customers and could take more value from that? Or is it something to steer clear of because they want to own that customer relationship entirely and exclusively for themselves? This creates yet again more uncertainty and pace of change for consumer businesses and of course means that agility and the ability to experiment are more important than ever. And of course all of this is enabled by cloud technologies.
Yeah, Martin, that's interesting. And I certainly serve a number of B2B clients that are developing services that either, directly work with the users of their business to business relationship or directly go to consumers. That's meaning that they need to use cloud technologies and develop new operating models to directly serve consumers, which is challenging in a number of areas. Of course, a number of consumer businesses are global in nature. And of course, a challenge that they face is that their world isn't entirely consistent. And certainly from a cloud data perspective, Jeremy's mentioned Brexit, but obviously if you're a consumer business, you need to respond to geopolitical events as we've seen, but also if you're working in China or Middle East, you're dealing with sort of different social media platforms, different ways to interact with your potential customer base, and different cloud hosting arrangements in each of those markets. And we're certainly spending time with some of our clients, helping them explore how to best penetrate China, Middle East, those sort of markets.
Yeah, it's a really interesting topic, Richard. And I guess with all of the kind of challenges and opportunities that you've all talked through, what do you see as the themes, I guess, in digital and cloud transformations in the consumer industry?
So maybe I'll start. Clearly many consumer businesses use cloud as a de facto model for delivering the digital edge for the consumer retail experience. But I think we're seeing more organizations now beginning to use cloud to automate processes and transform at the core. Last year, our UK cloud survey suggested that organizations are pretty satisfied with their cloud investments, what with agility, the benefits achieved from cloud, but relatively few had scaled the use of cloud across multiple departments and use cases. I think what I'm seeing in consumer-focused organizations is those organizations are starting to use cloud-only technologies such as intelligent interfaces, pattern matching, scalable serverless functions to transform processes, perhaps in terms of service planning or fulfillment. And here, experimentation, failing fast are key traits where organizations are seeking to transform how they deliver service to better satisfy the consumer need. Jeremy, what's your take on this?
I completely agree. It's taking much longer for organizations to think about how they're digitally transforming that core than some of the more customer focused elements of technology. I've seen a couple of different approaches to that aspect. First approach, probably more prevalent in businesses which have a stable business model, maybe are entrenched in a particular market position, no particular desire to change that status quo. So no compelling need to evolve. And these organizations typically replacing existing technology capabilities with cloud equivalents. So for example, moving their on-prem ERP to its cloud version. The second approach is for the businesses who need to evolve, broadening into new markets or new areas of business. Evolution is fundamental to their strategy, or maybe their market might be more under the threat from new entrants. These organizations typically choosing to embed more digital practices and technical agility into that DNA around how they treat their core through things like adopting microservice architectures, shift to more product-oriented teams, scaling up their in-house development capabilities. So this group is evolving in order to prosper and needs that flexible cloud-based core in order to do so. Martin, what's your perspectives?
All interesting transformations though that our clients are facing into. Jeremy, Richard, you mentioned there. For me, it's all about pace, the ability to adapt to evolving user needs and business models as quickly as possible. And obviously the cloud native businesses have set the bar here, and anyone dealing with legacy tech is struggling to keep up. The other point I'd add actually is about data. So huge potential for use of data, and it's been promised for a long time, but most organizations I talk to are still struggling to really extract the value from the data that they now capture with digitized processes and digitized customer journeys. So a real challenge for most organizations to get their arms around.
So lots of opportunity, I guess, Martin. What are the conditions for success then for businesses?
Obviously, it starts with the customer. These are consumer businesses, and understanding the changing needs and finding unmet needs for the customer is where you win. And having a mechanism to identify and prioritize these is key. Then, of course, all about the right ways of working, operating model, if you like, to allow you to quickly test out your thinking and then scale for those ideas that are successful. All parts of the business have got to be aligned around this, with cross-functional teams driving outcomes, and that has to be enabled by the right budgeting and governance processes. Old school, lengthy governance and sign-off processes and traditional projects aren't going to get you there in this world, of course. And none of this, of course, is possible without attracting and retaining the right talent, key to all of the points we've talked about.
And Martin, one of the challenges that sometimes we face working with clients in this sector is that they've potentially, some of them have heavily outsourced and offshore IT in the past. And that can sometimes be an impediment to change. I think organisations need to face into the fact that doing some of this transformation will require greater investment in technology and delivery of potentially two different operating models, one for traditional technology and one for where we want to be more digitally agile. And there may be a real need to rework those ecosystem relationships with suppliers, with partners, so they better align to the direction you want to move into. And I think we've seen some organisations struggle where they've tried to transform, but within the tight constraints of an existing sort of managed service agreement or supplier relationship.
Yeah, I agree, Richard, and it's causing many clients to really rethink how they work, what they outsource, what they insource, and where they do outsource work, how they outsource it, and who to. Absolutely.
And I guess we talked about talent there. I'm really interested recently on how you stand up high performing teams, yeah, because the attraction and the retention of talent is really quite important, and people want to be part of a high performing team. So I guess, Richard, how have you seen organisations actually build those high performing teams in the digital cloud arena?
It's quite interesting, and we're working quite recently with a relatively conservative client, and a client that had adopted relatively modest amounts of cloud, had been through a relatively small amount of change, and they were experiencing attrition because they weren't providing the career path for some of the most talented engineers they had and for new talent. And they were realizing that change was a pretty important business imperative for their own technology function, because they wanted to be able to attract and develop talent. And so we see it as important from that respect. The key, though, is to create conditions where people can be successful. And many of these businesses will create product-aligned teams, aligning a spectrum of skills, different tech people with different skills, working together in alignment to the business proposition or purpose, nurturing the talent and delivering an outcome at pace. And Jeremy, I think you've seen some of that in some of your clients.
Yeah, I completely agree, Richard. We talk about a war for talent, don't we? Because I think it's not just the consumer businesses that are trying to attract many of the same technical skill sets. It's businesses across industries. And so to compete in that market is difficult, because I think particularly some of the sectors within consumer are quite low margin. They don't pay as much as some competitors, or some organizations in tech, for example, or finance. So they've got to find other ways to compete and be an attractive place to work. So absolutely, you mentioned, Richard, product aligned teams. I think bringing multidisciplinary teams together, combining the business expertise with the user experience designer, with the digital engineer, the architect, etc., bringing those different skill sets together makes for a much more interesting and sort of lively day-to-day working environment, allowing the teams to make decisions autonomously and at pace, not being afraid to fail. I think, Martin, you mentioned that, didn't you? The fast failure sort of model, but fundamentally ensuring that your teams and the individuals are continually building skills, constantly developing themselves, working on exciting new technologies, learning new things, innovating. And I think the advantage that some of the consumer businesses do have is that it's an opportunity to make a difference to a product or a brand that could be a household name. I've always found that it's nice to go out and talk to friends after work about something that they can relate to, and consumer brands touch so many of us that if you're involved in a really exciting project within consumer, then that is very relevant and will make a difference to lots of us in all walks of life.
Lots of opportunity, but lots for organisations to think and worry about. So I guess I'd be really interested to understand, what your clients are asking for in this area, perhaps starting with yourself, Martin.
Obviously, there's a broad range of services that clients are asking for help with right now. But I think the interesting thing is the way in which they're asking for help. And they are very clearly asking us to work with them and help drive change with them rather than for them. They want to own the processes, they want to own the outcomes, they want to feel like it's theirs. And at the end of any engagement that we do with our clients, they want to be left in a sustainable position where they can be independent, where they've got the right people with the right skills and the right processes established to continue and be successful by themselves. This can drive a bit of a shift, I think, for consultancies and systems integrators, where we're no longer being asked to take a problem away and come back with the solution, but work hand in glove with our clients side by side. And it's a much more intimate and collaborative relationship than we may have had in the past, and causing us to rethink in some ways how we differentiate ourselves. Richard, what's your perspective on
Yeah,
this?
and I agree, Martin, in terms of certainly in terms of redrawing that relationship between supplier, partner, and internal teams. I would say that, I mean, on the slightly more technology side of our delivery spectrum, I think we often get called to make objective plans, blending and refresh of sort of technical debt, adoption of cloud with actual business advantage and a realistic business case. And I think we come across a number of organisations that are wanting to adopt cloud, that are being sold a cloud journey by a supplier or a hyperscaler, but internal teams that see risk rather than opportunity. And we're often working with our clients to actually get the right balance between prioritization, pace, risk, technical debt removal, and operating model transformation effectively. And that's a role that we often play, and I'm often playing in our clients. And we're doing that in the context, as you said, Martin, where we are working very much with them on their journey to achieve that transformation.
There really is a lot that all of our clients are being asked to do and being forced to do by market conditions. And a lot of the requests that I get are to help identify the priorities for investment, sort of cut through to what is the most important, what's going to provide the value to the business. A lot of it is about determining what the target should be and how best to get there. And then setting up and mobilizing those digital transformation journeys so the clients can get on with starting to focus on realizing the value that they're seeking from their technology investments.
Fantastic. So, I mean, it sounds like you're all going to be tremendously busy helping our wonderful clients through this journey. And fantastic final thoughts there for our listeners. But unfortunately, that does bring us to the end of today's episode. So thank you very much on behalf of our listeners, Richard, Jeremy, and Martin.
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you, Adam.
Thanks very much, Adam.
As part of our endeavour to keep you up to date with developments from the major cloud hyperscalers, this week we have Jose Babu, our Microsoft Azure ambassador. Over to you, Jose.
Thank you, Adam. It's wonderful to be invited on this episode of the Cloud Speed podcast. I'd like to discuss a service that has been on Azure for a very long time. Most Azure users, including myself, arrive at Azure Automation when they need to automate and manage updates on the virtual machines of their subscription. But Azure Automation offers a lot more. Azure Automation has been around since 2014 and has gone through several iterations and expansions to its current form. For cloud operations, automation is required in three broad areas: deploy and manage, where there is a need to deliver repeatable and consistent infrastructure as code; response, where events are used to automate diagnosis and resolution of issues; orchestrate, where we integrate our own automation with other Azure or third-party services. Azure Automation delivers on these requirements to support consistent management across Azure and non-Azure environments. It includes process management, configuration management, and update management. With process automation, Azure provides a way to automate frequent, time-consuming, and error-prone management tasks. This is done using Azure Automation Runbooks. Runbooks can be created using PowerShell, Python, or even a graphical editor. Automation runbooks reduce errors and boost efficiency, which in turn helps lower operation costs. Configuration management is supported by two capabilities: change tracking and inventory, and automation state configuration. Change tracking and inventory combines functions to allow users to track Linux and Windows virtual machines and server infrastructure changes. It supports tracking across services, daemons, software, registry, and files in the environment. This lets you diagnose unwanted changes and raise alerts. Automation state configuration is a cloud-based feature for the better-known partial desired state configuration, or DSE, which is widely used in enterprise environments. Using automation state configuration, you can manage DSE resources and apply configurations to virtual or physical machines within the Azure Automation estate. Coming to the most widely used Azure Automation feature, Update Management. Update Management gives visibility into update compliance across Windows or Linux machines on Azure and other clouds and on-premises. This feature allows users to create scheduled deployments that orchestrate installation of updates on virtual machines. Users can define maintenance windows, types of updates, and also define if a machine can be rebooted or excluded from update installation. You wouldn't want your production instance to go down for an update. And now for listeners who are familiar with and have been using Azure Automation, a heads up to an upcoming change. The run as accounts that we use to execute automation runbooks are retiring on the 30th of September 2023 and will be replaced by managed identity. This will require you to create user-assigned managed identities for automation accounts and use the same to connect to Azure in the runbook. It's still a year away, but best to plan ahead and migrate your runbooks in advance. There are guides and references available in Microsoft Learn site to help you do this. While I've delved into automation capabilities on Microsoft Azure, other cloud providers provide similar capabilities with automation options in AWS System Manager and GCP workflows. To rehash, Azure Automation provides a one-stop solution to automating the mundane, routine tasks that are associated with managing an Azure and/or a hybrid environment. That brings us to the close of updates for this episode. Thank you, Adam, for having me. Back to you.
So that really does bring us to the end of today's episode, listeners. We hope you've enjoyed listening. If you have, please do share this podcast with your network. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn at Adam Gogarty and check out our website at deloitte.co.uk/cloud. But until we meet again, I'm Adam Gogarty and you've been listening to Cloud Speed by Deloitte.